The state is so sprawling and so vast, these interests so powerful, that there are perfectly reasonable people sort of wandering around. I'm involved in activism. I'm doing a good thing. How diffuse are these interests? How do they truly work? And I wonder if you can give us a clear example of how these interests are able to cooperate and how the cartilage of NGOs works.
Yeah, sure. Maybe we can start with that cartilage concept, which is a really great way to sort of visualize how state control over media works. So at the end of World War II, a so-called rules-based international order was constructed. You may have heard this phrase bandied about by folks who are involved in the government or who are involved in sort of official media. They refer to the rules-based international order, which was constructed about 1947, 1948 in the aftermath of World War II and sort of in between it. We had Bretton Woods in 1942 to 1944. We had the Marshall Plan for Reconstruction of Europe in the 1940s. We had the IMF and World Bank set up. We had the UN set up to tie all the countries together. And we had something called the UN Universal Declaration on Human Rights, which promised national sovereignty to every country on earth as a fundamental right. And within that was a formal prohibition under international law of the acquisition of another country by military force. So the age of empire that existed from the Roman times all the way up until World War II, where you would maintain an empire or you would acquire an empire by sending your military in to take over a territory, became a violation of international law. And so our traditional military and spycraft structures had to switch to another method to achieve a functional territorial acquisition. And that was through political control over a country, or sometimes referred to political, economic, and informational control, which is now known as soft power. So hard power being military, soft power being getting a country under your control because its political leaders are under your control, its courts are under your control, its educational systems are under your control. And one of the main methods to achieve that control is controlling the media ecosystems within that country. That way, the masses of people, its leaders, its courts, all of its decision-making bodies are essentially on brand with whatever the talking points being piped in from U.S. government-sponsored media were saying. And so, starting in 1947, we created in the U.S. the Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA, and we restructured our entire spycraft intelligence apparatus along something that was called the plausible deniability doctrine. And the great starting place for this is one of the godfathers of the CIA. His name was George Kennan. He posted a memo to, this is one of the very first National Security Council documents we have in this country. It's called the Inauguration of Organized Political Warfare in 1948. This is 12 days after the CIA rigged the Italian election in Italy using dirty tricks, stuffing ballot boxes, importing swarms of media, working with both the church and with mafia groups who they had a liaison relationship with to overthrow Mussolini. And so George Kennan writes a memo saying, listen, we need to start looking at warfare as being political warfare. We need to undergo what he called the inauguration of organized political warfare, a fundamental restructuring of our power projection to engage in organized political warfare on every country on earth in order to swing it into our influence. And if we don't do it, the Bolsheviks are going to do it. So somebody's got to be doing the dirty work. We know America has not traditionally done this in any sort of organized fashion, but this is the new way war has to be done after this UN Declaration on Human Rights. And so with that kickoff, we embarked on a mass, quote, capacity building. This is the phrase that they use in order to get media organizations under CIA or State Department control. And just so you understand, the plausible deniability doctrine was this idea that State Department wanted to do this dirty work directly. In 1789, when the U.S. had our first meeting of Congress, we created three agencies. We created the State Department, at the time it was called the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, it's now called the State Department, to manage the American empire and its assets. We created the War Department, which has changed its name in 1948 to the Defense Department, again, to create this false sort of messaging that we're actually not engaged in warfare abroad. We're engaged in forward defense. We're not taking over your country through war. We are just forward defending ourselves on your turf. And then the third agency that was constructed in that first meeting of Congress was the U.S. Treasury. You know, basically, so our money system, our military, and our empire, our State Department management, were all created, you know, at the foundation of America in our first meeting of our Congress. So when the Department of War changed its name to the Department of Defense and the CIA was created with this plausible deniability doctrine, it was explicitly created under this plausible deniability doctrine under this NSC memo 10-2, which gave the CIA carte blanche to rig elections, to control media, to engage in sabotage, to engage in demolitions, to engage in all manner of black propaganda or subversion, is so long as they maintain so-called plausible deniability, such that, quote, even if it were discovered, it would not be traceable to the US government. So understand there's a concept of that we call diplomacy, which is a very euphemistic word for control or power projection around the world. And we have two branches of the US government, two agencies that are charged with our diplomacy. The State Department does overt diplomacy, and the CIA does covert diplomacy. But the two are one iceberg, and they operate to synchronize with each other such that if there are things that we need to do on the power projection front that State Department wants, but State Department doesn't want attributed to the State Department, such as, say, blowing up a pipeline at the bottom of the Baltic Sea or getting tens of thousands of people in a foreign country on U.S. payroll so that they're financially bribed to print pro-U.S. media, we get the CIA to coordinate that, or at least that was the original structure. And so what was created at the time was called Wisner's Wurlitzer. Wisner's Wurlitzer was Frank Wisner, who is one of the sort of founding architects of the CIA. And he bragged that he was able to play thousands of media outlets around the world like a Wurlitzer, which is sort of like a church organ, one of these sort of multi-layered pianos that you could theoretically play with octopus hands. And so at the time, the U.S. had a huge first mover advantage together with Britain in media, which is that we had a first mover advantage in radio. We had a first mover advantage in TV programming. And the U.S. and Britain had the largest capacities for print media as well. And so on virtually every country on Earth and every continent, the CIA at the time was working directly, funneling money through foundations to create, often using, Cayman Island bank accounts, or using offshore bank accounts starting in the 1950s to do this, through foundations to then funnel money to media organizations on all 6 populated continents. And then the issue was Vietnam happened, and there began to be a major dissent within the U.S. for CIA and Pentagon priorities. Now, again, the CIA had boots on the ground in Vietnam 7 years before we sent in the boys with the military. And the problem is domestic political actors were forming against this foreign policy, State Department, CIA, DOD agenda. And all of it collapses if you don't get citizen funding, because it's all paid for by the taxpayers. So if people decide in domestic politics to vote against or to not fund the priorities of the blob, the foreign policy establishment, then the blob dies. The blob dies on the vine. And so what the CIA started to do in the 1960s and 70s is turn that Wisner's Wurlitzer apparatus inside to use media assets at 400 some different media institutions, as well as even bribing student groups on college campuses in order to get people to support the infinite war apparatus. That structure crumbled in 1975, but it reformed in 1983, and we're living in the aftermath of that. And that's really where it starts to get interesting.
Bloody hell, Mike. I mean, all we'd have to do is memorize what you just said, and we would have an understanding of the inception and execution of the deep state apparatus, how it pertains to foreign policy, media control, and the acquisition of citizen funding. What an extraordinarily comprehensive answer. Do you have trouble sleeping or staying asleep? Perhaps because you're a busy parent or you work incredibly hard. I have to sleep well every night. I can't muck about because I have to look after my family, I have to do my job well. Now, Dream is a luxurious drink blend filled with the highest quality sleep-promoting ingredients. It will help you to fall asleep and stay asleep. This is my favourite one, peanut butter, but there are other flavours as well. Here they are. Now, you can incorporate this easily into your nighttime routine like I have done. It helps me wake up refreshed, not at all groggy like other sleep-promoting agents might. If you get a subscription, it saves you 20% every single month. Not to mention, you get a little free frother look. One scoop of Beam Dream is clinically shown to help you fall asleep faster, sleep through the night, and wake up fully refreshed. Visit shopbeam.com/RussellBrand. Use the code BRAND to get my exclusive discount of up to 35% off. And also, they'll know that you use this code, it'll make this advert look like a real triumph. Hey, thanks for watching. If you want to see more uncensored content where free speech can flourish, join our live stream. Click the link right here to watch the next video if you want to, or become a member of a growing movement. Download the Rumble app and you'll be informed every time we make a new piece of content. Stay free.